Bismillah. We're back with another In Context. It's just me and you today. And I figured we'd visit Trump again. We talked about
Mhm.
him briefly when he first became president, but a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks in particular with regards to his demands. It seems like there's a pattern he has, and he's using this pattern across the board with regards to Ukraine, Palestine, Canada, Mexico, Greenland. And the pattern is I demand the moon and then I negotiate down. I don't see the negotiate down aspect just yet, but I'm assuming that's what's going to end up doing. And I'm assuming we're also going to discuss there's this new pattern that he's imposing on everybody, especially with regards to Europe. Does that hurt U.S. interests? Because now you're doing this to your quote unquote allies. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. So today is March 8th, 2025. And we're trying to figure out what is going on with the US foreign policy. And my assessment in short is this is a break with the standard US foreign policy for the last century, or foreign posture of the US for the last century of talk softly and carry a big stick. Uh, with Trump, it's more like stick 'em up, cowboy style of uh, foreign policy stance. Uh, Foreign policy doesn't change, at least doesn't change quickly. I don't think we are seeing a fundamental change in the way the US sees its international interests. Uh, Trump might make a lot of hoopla or talk trash about globalist and localist and all kinds of nonsense. This is more of campaign speak, and it's wrong to try to understand policy from the perspective of cheap talk for his electors to keep electing him while he shortchanges them. The international interests of the US, strategic interests of the US haven't changed. The US is the dominant power, the organizing power of the international order. It extracts a lot of economic benefits and political benefits and security benefits out of that. It wants to continue to maintain this position for the foreseeable future or forever in their minds. And it's trying to find ways to do that. Now, whether the face of the government is Bush Jr. or Biden or Trump, keeps trying to do the same thing in different ways. However, the important point I want to make today is Trump is squandering an important foreign policy asset of the US, which is, we call it soft power. They look more moral and they try to occupy the high ground while getting to all kinds of nefarious and nasty criminal acts.
Mm.
Uh, Trump is for putting the nefarious and nasty acts in the foreground. He thinks that puts him in a strong position because he's obsessed with projecting power for electoral purposes and as a policy, because he thinks that gets him where he wants to be. And those around him, it's not just Trump, those around him, the emerging wing of the jingoistic wing of the Republican Party, uh, thinks that this is the way to do business. Uh, to my mind, actually, this is a bad move. It's as bad as Bush Jr. Starting a new colonial era in 2001. So that actually brought the US down from the uncontested First Nation, the organizing power of the international order, to the contested First Nation and organizing power of the international order. It isn't that the US fell after Bush took over from its uh, crown. It's that it wobbled, so it became subject to contest after Bush adventures in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think Trump is delivering a second blow to U.S. international influence in the world by making this posture. Let's talk about details.
Sure.
So Trump starts with his neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico, by making crazy demands on them. they actually have two international treaties to regulate trade. They have the World Trade Organization Treaty, and then they have the NAFTA that he renamed and renegotiated in his first term as U.S. Mexico Canada, which is a weird name, treaty. And these treaties organize the trade between the three countries. The U.S. is not a charity. It's not in the business of giving charity. The only reason these treaties exist is because the U.S. makes more out of them than everybody else, because the U.S. is the dominant power. So when they strike deals, they strike from position of power. So it is normal, however, for each new administration that comes into power to renegotiate these treaties, because over time, economic activity adjusts, and the U.S. discovered that its advantage would be to change the way it's balancing these treaties. So that happens in an orderly fashion, and Biden did that. Trump did that with Hoopla the last time, and this is a cyclic process. But he's choosing to make this cyclic process through making crazy demands. You're as you put it, asking for the moon, and not just asking, it's threatening to take the moon, actually, and then negotiate down from there. That would work, actually, because the US dominates Canada and Mexico. They're not about to up and move, so you'll have to play along eventually. And he won't be slapping these absolute crazy tariffs on them, because actually, as we have seen, he had to walk it back because his car industry told him that we can't do business that way.
Correct.
You're going to disrupt our business. So he had to back off. But when it comes to his other demands, that's where the problems arise. So right now he is threatening Europe. So when he talks about pulling out of Ukraine, he's not just talking about pulling out of Ukraine. Vance was there before in Munich, and he was talking about pulling out of NATO. And he is making all kinds of noises about playing all kinds of games with NATO. And making it as if the US is giving charity to Europe by protecting it through NATO. The US indeed was the protector of Europe since the end of Second World War. But it isn't true that this was charity. The US was doing it for multiple purposes. First, yes, it used Europe as a buffer zone, as a sort of set of sandbags to protect the US from Russia. So that Russia couldn't strike at US, and the US was secure behind the European sandbags. So it's normal that you would fill your own sandbags. Nothing news. But more importantly, the international order we live in is a Western colonial order. It's not a US colonial order, it's a Western colonial order. US took the mantle of controlling the international order as a part of the Western alliance. And the US extracts a lot of its international legitimacy from being part of this alliance that approves and supports and claps for US actions. You can see that clearly by comparing the world perception of the US colonial adventure in Afghanistan to the US colonial adventure in Iraq. In Afghanistan, the Western alliance stood with the US and gave it legitimacy. In Iraq, it broke off and fractured. Part of the alliance went with the US to occupy Iraq. Part of it disapproved and said this is illegal and unacceptable. And as a result, it doesn't have the same sheen of legitimacy. So when the US carried over Europe with it, it didn't carry it over only because Europe provides additional military and economic power with it, but also it maintains the international Western colonial order. It helps to maintain that order. It helps to give it legitimacy and continuity. But there's a third and maybe more important element. Europe was the dominant colonial power throughout the first half of the 20th century and most of the 19th century. So Europe is a colonial power by culture and by instinct. The US was keeping it in check while it was protecting it. Now the US is casting them off and telling them, well, you go away and do your own business and worry about your protection from Russia. We're not going to protect you. You guys are not interested to us. Well, the US is actually, Europe is actually picking up this. Last time Trump made these kinds of noises, Europe said, no, no, we'd like to you to stay around and we're going to do whatever you want us to do. We are your devoted partners and stuff. This time around, actually, it's Germany, which is typically the closest to the US in Europe, that is leading the charge of, no, we have to strike on our own. We have to be independent. To the US mind, I think they see this, and I think they think this is a good thing because they think that the only way they can do the business, important business, strategic business of containing China is to cast off the weight of Europe. The US keeps saying that we can actually fight two international crises at once, but that is not true. The US at most can fight one international crisis at once while staving off another brewing one in the background. And you can go throughout the post-Second World War history, and you will always observe that there is always one thing center stage. The US has tried to get into the business of containing China since Bush came to power in 2000. He actually came with a strategic goal of containing China and started picking a fight with China. Then got distracted with Afghanistan and the new colonial era on the Muslim world. Obama tried to get back into that business, but again, couldn't get far with it. Trump tried to disengage, couldn't do it. Biden tried to disengage and ended up getting engaged in Ukraine and doing a good job of containing Europe. On the other hand, he did not go and do the job of containing China. So I think the wing of the Republican Party, the jingoistic wing of the Republican Party around Trump, thinks that the only way they can get on with the business of containing China is the cast of Europe. And they think that Europe is not going to go very far because it's setting itself against Russia. They're making sure that it sets itself against Russia by making Ukraine the hot issue. And that means that it's going to be busy on the at least short to medium term. I think that is wrong because of two things. First, Europe is quite significant economic power. And as Europe makes it clear, we are actually a larger economic power than the US. Europe actually are asserting stronger economic influence and has been doing this for the last 10 years than the US in defining how the capitalist economic system works. So the US has been, Europe has been taking charge of regulating new areas of economic activity for the last 10 years through the European Union. So to discount them is wrong. To discount their colonial interests is wrong. Not just that, the international order is not static, it's dynamic. And if the US thinks that it can cast off Europe and get it to busy with Russia, and that's where it's going to end, that's not right, because China is already talking to Europe, well, you guys are not our enemies. We have no business fighting with you. You're not trying to, you do not gain much by getting into fight with us. We all lose. So why not create a detent? Europe is of two minds on this. Germany is occasionally antagonistic to China, then friendly to China. Britain actually led the fight against China for the better half or the last half of the previous decade, but it's cooling off a bit. France has never been explicitly antagonistic to China, so it's not obvious that Europe would fall for this trap of supporting the US while it contains China. China sees its opportunity in neutralizing Europe clearly. So I'm not sure that would work well for the US. Trump is opening a can of worms, and I pray to Allah that it will fall in his lap.
I mean, so with regards to Mexico and Canada, they know first of all, this is normal. Every president comes in and tries to change the agreements to lean in their favor. In other words, an agreement 4 years ago, the conditions might have changed a little bit, or there's new constituents that Trump has to serve to that are that helped him get into power. We would like this change, and therefore this is his method by which is changing it. So they know eventually they're going to discuss it.
Biden did the same thing, but nobody noticed. I think what he is going about is projecting power. So you beat down your friends, your enemies will fear you.
Then when we turn our sights to Europe, that's interesting analysis we're saying. If you look at U.S. strategic interests in the outside in foreign policy perspective, they've only always had one central warfare or one not warfare. I'm sorry. What did you say?
One cause,
One cause.
one
Yes.
hot problem, one problem at a time.
One problem at a time. So Middle East, one problem at a time. Ukraine, one problem at a time. In order to clear that deck, they're handing Europe, Russia on open again. I see it. Okay. Okay. In order to do that, that means we should see in the next year something where they're reorganizing their efforts towards China, correct? And that would
Yes.
validate what you're saying.
Well, actually, the other day, someone on TV in one of his shows, Trump shows in the White House, some news person mentioned AUKUS, and Trump didn't know what was AUKUS. AUKUS.
Orcas,
Didn't know
yes.
what AUKUS, which was really scary. AUKUS is the alliance between the US, England, and Australia to contain China in South China Sea. So that was really scary. Aside from this, this lack of control over the details, which that's a personal trait of Trump, the group around him and the administration as a whole has this perspective. He has a few types, especially in Defense Department, who are China hands, who are focused on, okay, so what do we need to do to bring China to heel? So these quirks aside, there is, I see serious efforts or serious signs of getting after China. Point is, if you make a prediction, then you have to make a concrete prediction. So we can see if this understanding or this construction or this theory has any bearing, which is correct. If
Sure.
the only way you can prove that a theory has some bearing on reality is if you make concrete predictions and you examine them and see if they work or not. So the concrete prediction here is, although we are not in the business of prognostication again, is over the next year, the US is going to work to try to contain, not to get into war with China, to contain China. Contain means constrain its growth, constrain its influence. And what that would mean is the US will try to create fences around China in Central Asia, South Asia, and East Asia.
That leaves one more area. Because in all this mess the last couple of weeks, we also saw Trump's Gaza plan or Riviera thing. Is this worth even
the
commenting
Rivera
on?
thing? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's the same style of declare that you're going to seize the moon.
Mm.
In this case, seize Gaza, literally. And then allow your servants in the Arab League to offer you your own plan as an alternative to you seizing Gaza. So what the Arab states are offering is Biden plan. This plan was shopped around by Harris last winter. The plan, as they leaked it to Reuters, which is not what they announced actually in the conference, is underlings of the Arab governments will control Gaza directly as a governing body. Those underlings may be Palestinian or other Arabs, under the supervision of a monitoring board made of the Arab Zionist states, the US, UK, and the European Union, and beyond this, within this structure, the Egyptian army will play the role of thugs and enforcers, kill out any resistance, while the UAE administrators will do the job of pimps, buy out everybody inside. That was what they leaked to Reuters. What they announced is different and more like what they have been working on since last summer, which is we're going to put a governing body made of technocrats acceptable to Hamas and to Abbas, which means maintaining the status quo before the war. I think that while what they leaked is the maximum demands of the US, what they concluded the meeting with is the minimum demands of the US. And what we'll end up with, which is what the US is negotiating with Hamas right now, is somewhere in between.
I see it. Okay.
But it's again the same style, same Trump style, projecting power, declare that you're going to seize the moon and let your underlings and your junior allies grovel to try to convince you to take something less, to make sure that you absolutely extracted the most you can take out of them.
Yeah.
And as a final thought, I think this is a very short-sighted approach, because while it might work for a con artist like Trump as a person and a businessman, it doesn't work for the organizing power of the international order. The organizing power of the international order throughout history has had to maintain credibility with those it controls and contains and puts in check and occupies, if it was a colonial power. Because they have to be able to predict your behavior to respond to it. Otherwise, you don't have order. If there is no predictability of your behavior, whether good or nasty or whatever, then there is no order. Order means predictability. So if you keep making impossible demands and expecting people to react to them to make sure that you get the most out of it, you are undermining predictability. You are undermining order itself. And what that means is the other powers are going to react to it to try to find any new ways in which they can create order. Even if they don't want to, but actually they want to, because there are a lot of other people, other powers that would like to take your place. So you're inviting others actually to try to make a raid on a seed that appears to be starting to open up.
All right, I have one more question, my personal knowledge. Is this strategy the genesis of a man like Donald Trump's thoughts? Or does the party get together and say, listen, this is one of the things he's done before, he's good at it. Let's use his style. And they kind of both came up with this policy. In other words, talking to your Ukrainian president the way they did, an unprecedented move as far as talking to a white Western leader like that was shocking. I remember I watched a lot of UK journalists talk about it, and they were all of them said, quote unquote, I've been in this business 20 years, I've done this 30 years, I've never seen someone speak to us like this. And they said us because they include him in the circle. My point is,
yes, because this is part of the master race.
Yes.
Don't let the master race around.
Yes. This is Trump's genesis, and they're like, okay, we'll go with it. Or they thought of this plan. This is let's rip the Band-Aid off and get Europe on their own. And we'll use Trump to do so. I know maybe the end, it's semantics, because the result is the same, whether he thought of it or he didn't think of it, but I'm just fascinated by this.
We can get at that. So first, the political machine of the Republican Party doesn't particularly like Trump. However, and actually it was actively working to get rid of him and his cronies after he lost elections last time. However, it lost heart midway and decided that its meal ticket, the way to stay in power was Trump. And as a result, decided that we can't beat him, we'll join him. So that means that, and Trump understands that. He understands power very well. So he is in control of the political machine of the Republican Party. A big part of it is grumbling. Like that rabid dog he set on the UN, she is not really one of his cronies, but she is groveling very fervently because she found that this is her meal ticket. I mean, Stefanik. But that aside, this is internal. What Trump is doing represents an evolution of a long-running wing of the Republican Party. Sometimes people mistakenly call it isolationist. It's not isolationist. It's power hungry and jingoistic. Typically, this wing has been allowed to make noises to scare people, but not allowed to be in charge. So these people have always been around in the Senate, and they have always saying, well, the UN is a conspiracy against the US Constitution. We have to defund the UN. This I can personally, I recall this all the way back to Reagan. I'm that old. Okay. So this has been around but there is continuity in this. But the crazies weren't in charge of the business before. I don't mean that they are absolutely crazy, but they behave in crazy ways. Okay.
Yes.
Now the crazies are in charge of the business. The brouhaha at the White House with Zelensky was clearly planned, and everybody's saying that.
Yes.
Now, Trump sycophants are saying, well, actually, it's Zelensky who planned it, but that's nonsense. Trump planned it with his lapdog Vance acting as attack dog, and it was meant to put Zelensky in his place. The only problem is the other guy is not trivial like the Abdullah the English. So as a result, the scene did not come out the way Trump wanted it, as Trump lording it out while Zelensky groveling. And Europe liked that a lot, so they backed him up. So in my opinion, this blew up in Trump's face. May he see a lot of these blow-ups.
Jazakallah khair. I think we covered it all.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Till next time.